Rover, one of the many powerhouses driving Britain forward, would sadly in its later years be viewed as stodgy and old-fashioned. This once proud marque would be allowed to degrade to the point of no return, with it going into administration in 2005. However unjust this might have been, there is one thing nobody can deny. Rover in its heyday were an absolute powerhouse. The P6, P5B and its Land Rover were cars that set the template for nearly a century of motoring. But there is one series of cars that aim to change the car as we know it today, a revolution in propulsion that demonstrated Rover's true engineering excellence. This is the story of the T-Series Rover Gas Turbine cars, a series of cars that appeared to be the future of motoring, pushing engineering to its very limits, but would eventually fade into obscurity. Hello everybody and welcome to this video on the Rover Turbine cars. If you're not subscribed already, please make sure to do so. It really does help me out and you get to see more of this. More history videos, more cars and classics uncovered and more projects. In this video we are going to explore some amazing jet cars and what Rover believed could be the future of transportation. What do you think about these cars? Let me know in the comments below. And do you have any Rover British Leyland or BMC memories? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to like the video if you liked it and share if you want other people to see it. But without further delay, let's get into this video on Rover's gas turbine future. Back in the 1950s, Britain was completely different to what it is today. In fact, the whole world was. The deadliest war man had ever waged had ended 5 years earlier with Allied victory. Technological advancement had accelerated due to the struggle between the Axis and the Allies. The jet engine designed by Frank Whittle in 1937, the cavity magnetron, the advanced radar responsible for detecting U-boats and enemy aircraft at night in 1940, the first electronic computer Colossus, developed by Tommy Flowers in 1943. The first jet-powered Allied aircraft, the Gloucester Meteor in 1943. The first jetliner, the de Havilland Comet, in 1949. And they all had one thing in common. They were all British. As you can imagine, confidence in Britain was high, especially on the engineering front. The Rover Company was one of Britain's many car manufacturers turned to war production, but in the later half of the war, when victory was within the Allies' grasp, they started to think about what the world looked like after the bombs stopped falling. The two brothers Maurice Wilks and Spencer Wilks, responsible for Rover at that time, would start to put together the post-war strategy for the company. Maurice would have grand ideas and suggest to his brother Spencer that they should consider alternative production, more specifically, gas turbine powered cars. But there was one problem. With complexity comes cost, and that wasn't something Rover could stomach at this time without significant financial discomfort. The question is, why wouldn't Rover just stick with piston powered cars? Why waste time with a technological flight of fancy? Well, gas turbine engines had many benefits. They were lighter, smoother, meaning better power to weight ratios, and could run different types of fuel. Anything from perfume to jet fuel, they were incredibly versatile. It was speculated at the time the car would go the same way as the fighter, from piston power to jet power. And why wouldn't Rover want to be at the forefront of this technological revolution? Spencer would approach his friend Henry Spurrer at another big firm, Leyland, with an agreement being struck between the two for Leyland to partially finance the project, but Rover, of course, would be the proprietor of the whole thing, in charge of all the engineering and timelines. By the end of 1945, under a shroud of secrecy, work had begun deep in Solihull. Project Department C would be responsible for this project under Frank Bell and Spencer King, both of whom had worked at Rolls-Royce during the war on gas turbines for Allied aircraft. The project, though, would run into issues almost immediately. The exotic materials needed were incredibly hard to procure given the circumstances, a world bruised and battered by war. So, for the first prototypes, the team would need to improvise. The first gas turbine engine built by Rover would roar into life in 1947, the T5. Not the car, the engine. They hadn't quite got the naming scheme quite right yet. This new engine would produce 100 brake horsepower at 55,000 RPM compressor speed, an impressive feat, especially when most cars would top out at 70 brake horsepower at the time. A few mishaps, explosions, would befall this engine, and it would be superseded by several designs, but the first ready to be installed into a car would be the Rover T8. The engine would be tested in a boat, boasting an impressive 230 brake horsepower, nearly doubling the specs of the T5. Now they had the propulsion, they just needed the platform to match. This would lead them to the Rover P4. The Regal Anti would be chosen as a base. It was widely available and stable at high speeds. Salmons Tickford would be tasked with creating a new body. The engine would be placed in the back behind the seats to simplify the exhaust run. Rover would change the open top two-seater version to have 3 seats, so they could take an extra engineer along. The new engine would use a twin-shaft design, with the main engine section using a centrifugal compressor and an axial turbine, with power delivered from another turbine that drove the output shaft through a set of helical reduction gears. In March 1950, the car now known as Jet 1 was ready, and on the 4th of that same month the car had its first run. A 0 to 60 sprint in 14 seconds, 85 miles per hour top speed, and a very modest 6 miles per gallon. Now that doesn't seem too impressive to some, but this was the first of its kind, the first ever gas turbine powered car. A later revision would be made in 1952, a slight restyle and the introduction of a Cyclops grille, and an uprated T8 engine, boasting 230 brake horsepower. It would then achieve the world record for gas turbine cars, topping out at 152.69 miles per hour. Fuel consumption again was very modest, 6 miles per gallon, but more than double the horsepower and speed. While the brute engineering might of the team was impressive, their ability to improvise was also quite interesting. With parts so scarce for the first jet car, it would utilise some interesting components. For example, the brake to stop the turbine from spinning back on itself was from a second-hand bicycle, and the oil cooler was from the original Land Rover. The thriftiness of this cutting-edge engineering masterpiece would go largely unnoticed by the press, but in standard British fashion after war's end, it was all make, do and mend at its finest. In the cockpit there were no less than 12 gauges, a speedo, bearing temperature gauge, oil inlet and outlet temperatures, compressor pressure gauge, oil and fuel levels plus pressures, compressor RPM, turbine outlet temperature, and finally an ammeter. Jet 1 would be shown off around the world, especially in the States, where it would capture the minds of American companies like Chrysler. In the wake of Jet 1's success, it was time to look at building a completely bespoke gas turbine car. After all, Rover weren't trying to get their cars into the Science Museum, they were trying to get them on the road. This would lead to the testbed T2, a first step toward turning the dream into reality. But there was one problem, a major one. This car, largely based on borrowed Land Rover parts, would have some significant issues with the front-mounted engine, with exhaust gas issues condemning the car. But there would be another, relatively obscure Rover jet car, the T2A, a P4 with a gas turbine engine in the back, registered MAC 273. This car would disappear into obscurity, but served as an engineering stepping stone. Things would start to heat up, and the next car would be the Rover T3, a purposely designed gas turbine car from the ground up. Work on the car would start in the mid-50s, with the prototype painted in a rather fitting blue colour. An attempt was made for the car to be practical. A proper saloon was designed around the gas turbine engine, and in my opinion, it wouldn't look out of place at the time popping to the shops, in an alternative reality of course. The T3 was again mid-engined, but used a more well-known gas turbine engine, the 1S60, an adaptation of the same turbines that were used in fire pumps, but also APUs in planes like the Avro Vulcan. The new engine used a single-stage centrifugal compressor with a max RPM of 52,000. The compressor was driven by a single-stage axial turbine, redesigned for the T3's application, so that it could take sufficient power from the gas stream to drive the compressor, fuel and oil pumps. A single-stage power turbine was also added, which takes the power from the remaining gas stream and drives the front and rear drive units, making the car four-wheel drive. Another addition was a heat exchanger, which increased the fuel economy, something which Jet 1 lacked. MPG was up from 6 to 14 miles per gallon, with a 0 to 60 sprint completed in around 10 seconds. With a body made of glass reinforced plastic and the lightness of the turbine engine, the car was incredibly light, although it never got weighed. Funnily enough, this was the first Rover to use the Didion rear axle, something that would become standard on a later model. But the T3 wasn't all about power and engineering. Practicality played a pivotal role. Thanks to the engine being mounted at the rear, a low bonnet line could be achieved, allowing for better visibility. Full wraparound windows were also added, reverse as well, from a conveniently placed lever. On the inside, complexity was reduced from 12 instruments down to 4, only the necessities, less science experiment, more practical motoring. This really was a serious attempt to create the future of the car. Rover's real intent could be seen in the marketing. A brochure would be released by Rover detailing the new car with a tagline, "A foresight of tomorrow's motoring." As with any new technology, there were still a few problems to be solved. Fuel consumption was, although impressive for its application, quite bad, and the throttle response was relatively poor. All problems that could be solved, but there was one big problem that couldn't. And that big problem was the advancement of piston-powered engines. You see, the 50s and 60s were a time of rapid innovation, from the small block V8s of America to the more modest British engines like the A-Series. Piston power still had its place. By nature they had better throttle response, thanks to their busier inner workings, and with more mature designs, the piston engine counterparts were soon outpacing their gas turbine brothers. But this wouldn't stop Rover. They would kick it up a notch with their next car. The Rover P6 started development in the late 1950s to replace the P4 as Rover's mid-sized saloon. But this time it was going to be a less traditional affair. The P6 was continental, more stylish than regal, and more advanced than conventional. Rover's P6 was designed to accommodate a gas turbine engine from the outset, with the front suspension and capacious engine bay being the perfect size for the new 2S 140 engine unit. Rover's gas turbine project would pluck a P6 prototype unit, more specifically chassis number 10, to create this new car, and create the first mass-market gas turbine-powered motor car. Oddly though, the car would have independent swing arms with coil springs instead of the rear Didion axle. During testing, it was found that the new 2S 140 engine would manage 16 to 20 miles per gallon on a run, rather impressive considering Jet 1 had only managed 6 miles per gallon only a few years earlier. The engine produced around 140 brake horsepower, again another significant jump in performance. Since the new T4 was intended to be a production car, it needed to be simplified. While the previous T3 was a technical marvel with its four-wheel drive, the T4 needed to be cheap enough to make, buy and maintain. Therefore it was decided to make the front-mounted engine drive the front wheels, a direct contribution from the Rover T2, an earlier car, and the problems with the exhaust gases it highlighted being solved. By 1961, the Rover T4 was ready to be shown. The press loved it, not for its remarkable power plant, but for how conventional it looked. The interior, simplified and largely P6 based, looked almost production ready. It truly looked like the future was right in front of them. It was civilized and normal, a jet car that blended right into traffic. Rover claimed the new car would be ready for production in around 3 years and cost around £3,000 at the time, around £86,000 today. which was a bit expensive considering the most expensive P5 at the time cost around £1,850 or £55,000 today. But amongst all the success, it wasn't all as it seemed. You see, there were several problems Rover was struggling to overcome. Fuel consumption was far too poor for the general public. Even though the car could be ran on more or less any fuel, that wouldn't mitigate the amount of time spent pumping it in. The next problem would be production. Rover had hoped the scarcity would cease, but with the advanced alloys needed, production costs would be too high, and with the tremors of turmoil to come already being felt in the industry, it was an incredibly risky move to go with a loss maker. The third and final one would be the killer: the ever-advancing internal combustion engine. Rover's experimental piston engines were showing promise. Other manufacturers were seeing similar success. The gas turbine finally seemed, to Rover at least, like a flight of fancy. For all their flaws, the piston engine counterparts were cheaper and easier to produce, more economical and better to drive. While the gas turbine was thrilling, the throttle response was not, and no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't quite engineer out a characteristic of the engine. It appeared Rover's gas turbine dreams were over. The writing was on the wall, and by the mid-60s the idea of producing a gas turbine powered Rover car was over, with the new P6 dropping the concept altogether and eventually gaining the Rover V8, a far more economical, powerful and conventional power plant that would power Rovers for decades. While Rover didn't quite succeed in delivering a gas turbine car, they sure did try, against all odds, even partnering with BRM to produce a Le Mans car that, if it had been a formal entrant in its 1964 season, would have came 8th, an impressive feat of engineering. The world of the gas turbine car is full of hope and daring, engineers pushing the concept of the car to its very limit, seeing what could be done in the brave new world of mass market cars. While it wasn't successful, they had a damn good go, and inspired many, producing a series of cars unparalleled by any other manufacturer of the time, defying the conventional and showing what made Rover of this time so great: engineering excellence. And with that, it's the end of the video. What did you think about the Rover gas turbine cars, or gas turbine cars in general? Let me know in the comments below. Do you think it would have succeeded? As always, thank you for watching, keep watching and remember to subscribe for more of this, and I'll see you in the next one.